Hey guys, tonight we journey deep into the quiet pre-dawn world of Tang Dynasty breakfasts. You find yourself standing barefoot in a stone courtyard, the sky still heavy with stars, the lanterns casting gentle flickers against lacquered wood. The air carries a faint scent of lotus and wet ash, and somewhere beyond the walls, a rooster debates whether it's worth waking up yet. You're already awake, of course you are. You live in the Tang Empire, where breakfast isn't a meal. It's a ceremony, a daily devotional to grain, etiquette, and celestial harmony. And you, dear listener, have been summoned to endure every glorious, glutinous moment of it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I'd love to see who else is willingly subjecting themselves to fermented mustard greens at 1:37 a.m. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge softly through the inner gate, passing moonlit stones still slick from the temple gardener's midnight watering. You're not hungry yet, not exactly. Breakfast is hours away, and your first duty is to exist in silence until the heavens say otherwise. The Tang believed in timing, not as in, let's eat when we're ready, but as in, let's eat when the stars and incense and 5 metal clocks say it is permitted. You step into the anteroom, where a bronze clepsydra, a water clock, trickles faintly, each droplet descending into a polished bowl. Next to it, a slow-burning incense stick curls upward, its ash collecting with mathematical precision. These are the timekeepers of your life, and you dare not disobey them. Breakfast must come after the 8th drop, before the 13th. If not, well, you'd probably be exiled to write bad poetry in a salt mine. Again. Behind you, a servant shuffles in carrying the first ceremonial water. It's for face washing, and the basin is carved from a single block of white nephrite. The water, naturally, has been infused with chrysanthemum, because regular water would be uncivilized. You dab your cheeks and blink at the lantern light, trying not to sneeze. Chrysanthemum does that. You're not alone in your pre-breakfast procession. In the far corner, an elderly official mumbles to himself while unfolding a scroll of dietary mandates from the Imperial Medical Office. He's nodding solemnly at the passage about millet's superior warming qualities over barley. He's been reading the same scroll for 12 years. No one has had the heart to tell him it's upside down. Another figure bows slightly as he enters. You recognize the robes of a low-ranking tax registrar, deep blue with frayed edges. His sleeves are already stained with ink. He nods to you, barely awake, and mutters something about tofu allocations. Even before breakfast, the Empire's paperwork marches on. The sky begins to soften into a muddy gray. You glance upward, catching the faintest glow behind the tile roofs. This is when things begin to shift. When the concept of eating transforms from speculative idea to looming inevitability. A boy enters with a bamboo tray, upon which sits a solitary object, a long-handled wooden spoon carved into the shape of a goose. This is not for eating. This is symbolic. You hold it in your palm and recite a short verse, something about geese, rice, and the evanescence of desire. It's tradition. You're not allowed to actually like the spoon. In fact, according to a Confucian text, you must feel serene indifference. But you admit it. Just between us. You kind of love that weird goose. The breeze picks up slightly, bringing with it the smell of sesame oil from the servants' quarters. A stomach growls. Maybe yours. Maybe the registrar's. No one acknowledges it. In the Tang Dynasty, hunger is seen as a form of moral weakness. Breakfast may come soon, but wanting it is vulgar. Still, you're allowed to think, to meditate, to contemplate the metaphysical significance of pickled radish. Historians still argue whether this quiet waiting was meant as spiritual purification or just elaborate procrastination. Maybe both. Maybe the Tang were just really good at pretending to be patient while secretly hoping someone would break and start nibbling a yam under their sleeve. You pace softly across the stone floor, hands tucked into your sleeves, posture straight, not rigid, but composed. Breakfast is not for slouching. If you die mid-meal, the corner should find you properly aligned. You hear the sound of a distant chime. 3 tones, followed by a single thump. That's the cook's apprentice striking the ceremonial breakfast bell. It's not actually time to eat, of course. This is just the pre-chime. There will be 2 more. And so, you continue waiting. Calm, upright, half asleep, but wholly present. A servant brings out a lacquered tray with small ceramic bowls for the first steam. Not for eating, just to hold the scent of the grain once it's poured. The Tang understood that anticipation was half the flavor. Or maybe they just really liked dragging things out. You breathe in. Somewhere a chicken sighs in sympathy. You're not sure you'll survive this breakfast. But you're committed now. You're still standing there, quietly observing a spoon that looks like a goose, when the incense coil burns through its 6th mark. Almost time. But not yet. You already know better than to get ahead of the flame. Tang mornings run not on desire, but sequence. And next in the chain is the sacred duty of checking the clocks. To your left is a clepsydra, the same water clock that's been marking time since before your grandfather's grandfather last wore shoes indoors. It drips rhythmically, 1 drop every so many heartbeats, into a marked vessel with bronze lines etched inside like ribs. You glance at it. 7th drop. Almost there. But the Tang were never content with just one kind of time. That would be too simple. So next to the clepsydra sits the incense clock, essentially a long line of powdered incense laid out in squiggles, burning its way down like the world's most fragrant fuse. Some clocks are straight, some shaped like dragons or poems. This one is a simple spiral. Practical? Serious. You squint? Ash has reached the halfway curl. Good. You are exactly as on time as the Empire allows. A servant boy scurries in with the official timekeeper's lacquered tablet, the wooden block on which the hours are inscribed in gold leaf. He bows to the floor and announces it in a breathless whisper. The hour of the hare, 2nd division. You nod solemnly. That's the 8th water drop. Finally. Except, of course, you still can't eat. That would be absurd. No. Now comes the ritual acknowledgement of the passage of time. You take out a small brass bell and gently ring it 3 times, pausing between each chime. The sound floats upward like a prayer for patience. Across the courtyard, the elderly official does the same. Though his bell sounds suspiciously like he dropped it again, you proceed to the hearth room, where the first embers glow within a raised clay stove. The congee pot is there, thick ceramic with dragons carved along its sides. It's been soaking millet in cold water since the tiger hour. You peer into it and sniff. Still smells like water. Good. That's exactly what you want. Too much scent too early would signal overindulgence. You add the first scoop of heat, a lump of pressed charcoal made from pine needles and mulberry bark. It doesn't spark. It sighs, releasing a faint smell of sweetness and smoke. The air starts to shift. This is the most dangerous part of Tang breakfast, the waiting of the simmer. You're not alone. A junior monk has shown up, tugging nervously at his sleeves. He has come to oversee the boiling, not to cook, he'd be excommunicated for such profanity, but to verify that the pot's temperature rises at a morally acceptable rate. You exchange nods. He lights another incense stick and stares at the pot like it owes him money. The water begins to bubble gently. Not too fast. A boil is vulgar. A simmer is serene. You stir with a long-handled spoon, making 1 clockwise motion, 1 counterclockwise. This is not a superstition. It's written in the Qingjiao Manual of Morning Harmony, page 27, section 5. Stir as the planets move. Historians still argue whether that manual was satire. Most agree it was not. You reach for a gourd-shaped hourglass, filled not with sand but ground oyster shell and flower pollen. You flip it. Not for timing the porridge, but for monitoring your posture. Yes, that's real. In the Tang, how you wait was considered more revealing than how you act. So you sit, back straight, knees folded, and pretend this is all very normal. The monk begins humming softly. A tune about seasonal virtue and the perils of uncooked beans. You nod in rhythm. The bubbling continues. Then comes the moment. A single bubble, larger than the others, rises and bursts near the rim. You and the monk both notice. He gives a nearly imperceptible nod. That is the signal. The grain has reached awareness. Now begins the simmer phase proper. You lower the heat ever so slightly and sprinkle in dried longan and red jujube. Fruits chosen not just for taste, but for their medicinal alignment with spleen harmony. Again, historians can't agree if the spleen was seen metaphorically or literally. Tang doctors never clarified. Outside, the second chime sounds. You smile, barely. Everything is proceeding with terrifying accuracy. You pour the first ladle of broth into a ceremonial bowl, just to smell it. Not to drink. Please, what are you, a barbarian? No, you inhale it with a focused expression, then recite a verse about the moon. The monk does the same, except he gets distracted by a passing squirrel. The water clocks now read 10 drops. You begin to prepare the companion dishes. Not yet food, but signals of food. On a separate tray, you arrange tiny porcelain plates for pickled daikon, marinated lotus root, and the ever-suspicious fermented bean curd cube. 1 cube per person, no more. To take 2 would be unthinkable. Someone once did. He was reassigned to irrigation duty in Dunhuang. You place each plate at exact angles from your bowl, 45 degrees north for the root vegetables, 90 degrees for the tofu. The spoons, lacquered in red, go tip down in a small jar filled with warm rice water to awaken the wood. Everything is in balance. Everything is waiting. Your stomach makes another sound. You ignore it. The porridge whispers now, thick and slow and golden. You glance at the incense. The spiral is nearly done, just a few more grains of ash. The monk raises a hand. He speaks, barely above a whisper. It is time. You exhale. At last, the breakfast may begin. Almost. You would think, by now, you'd be allowed to eat. But this is Tang Dynasty breakfast we're talking about. No one just eats. Not without bathing first. Because in this world you don't dare bring yesterday's dust into a bowl of millet and jujube. Cleanliness isn't just about hygiene. It's about cosmic alignment. A dirty elbow could throw off your chi. So, reluctantly, you rise from your near-perfect sitting posture and begin the walk to the bathhouse. The floor is stone, cold and slightly damp, but your slippers have already been removed as a sign of internal stillness. You pass under an arched beam carved with phoenixes, each feather lacquered gold. The scent of pine smoke wafts toward you. The monk trails behind, still humming his digestion hymn. The bathhouse is a squat wooden structure with shuttered windows and steam curling out like the size of a tired empire. You enter, stepping through a curtain made of beads carved from dried lotus seed pods. Inside, heat, humidity, and silence. A servant bows wordlessly and hands you a small dish. On it, powdered bamboo ash, dried orange peel, and something green and suspiciously herbal. This, apparently, is your soap. You scoop a little into your hand and mix it with water from the hot spring basin. It foams, not delightfully, but in a way that says, yes, this will probably remove your soul's sins along with your skin oils. You begin scrubbing your arms and neck, carefully avoiding the imperial acupuncture points. A misaligned scrub could redirect your destiny, according to the treatise on celestial hygiene, which no one has ever finished reading, but everyone quotes. There's a knock. A tax clerk walks in, already half undressed, mumbling about tariffs on turnips. You nod in greeting. Bathing is a communal act here, and nothing pairs with scrubbing like political gossip. The two of you sit shoulder to shoulder in the steam basin, listening to the hiss of water against hot stone. The conversation never rises above a murmur, as if to avoid disturbing the dragon spirits believed to dwell in bathhouse rafters. Did you hear? He whispers. Someone in Luoyang served radish without first offering thanks to the stove god. You pretend to be horrified. Internally, you wonder what it's like to live with such reckless abandon. The bath itself lasts exactly 7 incense grains, the time it takes to burn 1/3 of a short stick. A boy with a brass timer taps a gong when time is up. You rise slowly, wiping your face with a linen square embroidered with the character for dawn. It's not yours, but in Tang breakfast culture, towels are communally poetic. Back in the dressing area, you're offered a fresh robe, pale indigo, lightly starched, sleeves wide enough to hide 2 scrolls and a small bird. You decline the bird. It's optional. As you dress, you catch your reflection in a bronze mirror. Your hair, damp and obedient, is tied with a cord of silk dyed with crushed plum. There's a moment here, maybe the only moment, where you actually feel prepared. Not just for breakfast, but for whatever bureaucratic oddity the day will serve you next. But you can't linger. The congee has reached its final simmer. You return to the dining area, robes flowing behind you like a minor official in a very dramatic poem. The monk has set the table mat. Literally, a mat on the floor woven from dyed reeds, marked at the corners with gold thread. Your bowl waits in the center. Steam rises like a temple offering. But even now, even in this perfectly composed moment, there's one last detail. You must acknowledge the food. Not with gratitude, that's implied, but with a short recitation. You clear your throat and speak the words as they were spoken 1,000 years before you, and would be spoken 1,000 years after, if empires were eternal. Grain from earth, warmth from fire, balance in bowl. The monk bows slightly. He replies with, mouth closed, thoughts open, chew with virtue. Historians still argue whether this exchange had actual spiritual weight or was just a form of digestive placebo. Regardless, you've completed the rite. At last, you lift the bowl. The spoon is still warm from its rice water soak. You slide it in, breaking the smooth surface of the porridge. A longan floats to the top, shimmering like an amber gem. You take the first bite, and oh, it's mild. So mild. Like warm water that once heard a rumor about sweetness. The jujube whispers its presence. The millet is tender but firm. The congee is adequate. Perfectly, transcendentally, gloriously adequate. You are not here for flavor. You are here for order. As you chew with reverent detachment, the monk picks up his own bowl and hums something that may or may not be a breakfast blessing. Outside, the sun is rising. The courtyard stones catch light and you realize you've passed the point of hunger. You are now simply eating, calmly, correctly, celestially aligned. Somewhere in the distance, a temple bell rings 13 times. You don't count. You already know what time it is. You've crossed the sacred threshold between ritual and reality. You are now, officially, having breakfast. But not so fast. Your current spoonful is only the foundational grain. The real work begins with arrangement. You set the bowl back down in its precise gold-threaded center. To its right, a delicate tray of accompaniments. Pickle things, root things, mystery things, all cut into geometric submission. You select a piece of pickled lotus root, marveling at its soft crunch, and place it next to your porridge. Not in it. Never in it. That would be like writing poetry in the margins of an official census scroll. You pick up a thin slice of daikon next, its edges curled like scrolls aged in vinegar. It smells faintly of melancholy and something your ancestors might have whispered during a famine. Excellent. These pickles aren't just flavor bursts, they're social signals. In the Tang, every preserved item on your plate tells others who you are. Fermented mustard greens? Scholar. Plums soaked in rice wine? Failed poet. Boiled gourd rind with 5-spice? Someone's uncle who's deeply into metaphysics. There was, in fact, an imperial banquet in 729 where a regional magistrate misarranged his pickles and was mistaken for a eunuch librarian. He was very cross about it. Historians still debate whether this incident led to the pickled etiquette revision of 731. You take another bite of congee, then pause to sip your tea. The tea itself has cooled, as it must. Hot tea was thought to inflame the spleen and make you too alert for poetry. This one is a lightly roasted green tea from Jiangnan, steeped in a celadon-glazed cup that's older than your oldest cousin. It tastes like warm leaves and maybe a little bit of bureaucracy. The tea leaves float gently, some settling in a pattern that, if you squint, looks like a crane. The monk notices too. He nods solemnly and murmurs, auspicious. Could mean longevity or tax reform. He's not sure which. You place the tea back on its coaster. Yes, a coaster, because the Tang didn't leave moisture rings like savages, and select the next item, a slice of fermented bean curd. It's small, cube-shaped, and smells vaguely of regret. You place it on the porcelain dish at a perfect diagonal from your spoon. This, apparently, is the polite angle. There is silence, save for the soft scrape of spoon against bowl and the occasional sigh of a monk. You're chewing slowly, mindfully, making sure each bite passes through the 5 moral stages of digestion: awareness, gratitude, chewiness, humility, and stillness. You've reached stage 3. The chewiness is profound. Across the mat, the registrar has finally arrived, robes slightly disheveled, eyes like half-boiled eggs. He nods, drops to his knees with a groan, and begins arranging his own pickles with the urgency of a man who overslept through 3 dynasties. Meanwhile, the monk is now composing a spontaneous verse about the jujube in his bowl. Round as moon, red as guilt, sweet as youth once lost. You hum approvingly, not bad. Could use more internal conflict. Then comes the tofu. Always the tofu. This isn't your soft supermarket tofu. No, this is pan-fried, triangular, golden-edged tofu with a faint dusting of 5-spice and sesame. It's placed at the edge of the tray, meant to be eaten last, after the pickles, after the tea, after the soul-searching. You lift it delicately with chopsticks. It jiggles just enough to remind you that tofu is not solid food. It's a philosophical suggestion of food. You dip it lightly into a saucer of black vinegar, then pause. The monk coughs. He looks horrified. You freeze. Right. That sauce is for egg. You calmly return the tofu to its dish. No one speaks. The error vanishes into the silence like a misplaced comma in a very long poem. Now, the boiled quail egg. It's tiny, flawless, and resting on a dish carved from petrified peachwood. You crack it gently. Inside, the yolk is perfectly centered, a sign of balance and inner virtue. Tang children were once taught to judge character by yolk symmetry. You were never very good at it. You sprinkle it with powdered salt and take a bite. The yolk crumbles softly. The whites are smooth, almost sweet. You nod to yourself. This egg has no enemies. At this point, you're halfway through the meal and the rhythm is steady. Spoon, sip, chew, arrange. You're not just eating, you're performing. Each movement a gesture, each flavor a footnote. A low bell chimes from the outer courtyard. 3 slow rings. That's the signal for the dish exchange. 2 boys walk in carrying fresh trays, this time with turnip threads, yam mash, and a single flower-shaped radish with chili threads curled like incense smoke. You nod respectfully. Presentation matters. You try the yam. It's light, fluffy, utterly bland. A culinary apology. The monk approves. The registrar is already mixing his with pickled brine, a move that would get him banished in the capital. And then, silence again. The kind of silence you could stack bricks on. You feel it settle into your chest, warm and full. You are not hungry anymore. You are not tired. You are simply present. Your bowl is empty. Your tea is half full. The pickles are reduced to polite memories. You bow slightly over the mat. 1 breath in, 1 breath out. Breakfast continues. You set your bowl aside with the practiced reverence of a palace archivist shelving a sacred scroll. Your hands return to your lap, fingers interlocked beneath long sleeves, posture as poised as a calligraphy brush before ink touches parchment. The hardest part of breakfast is now behind you, eating. What comes next is far more delicate, digesting without causing offense. In the Tang Dynasty, digestion was a social event. Not one filled with talking or movement, of course. That would be grotesque. But one filled with posture, facial expressions, and meaningful silence. You lean back slightly, just enough to signal contentment, but not so far as to suggest indulgence. You raise your teacup. You sip, not gulp. That would suggest thirst, and thirst is only appropriate for travelers, warriors, and the deeply unfashionable. The tea has cooled further. Now it's tepid, leaf-speckled, and so light it may as well be thinking about being tea rather than actually being tea. But you drink it anyway. It has done its job. A warm escort for rice and philosophy. Beside you, the registrar attempts a polite belch but redirects it into a brief nose exhale. Smooth. Very smooth. You nod in silent approval. There is a ceremony now. The brushing of crumbs. You take a stiff-bristled fan made from dried reed and sweep any fallen grain or rogue jujube skin from your mat. This is symbolic. It says, "My inner world is as tidy as my breakfast setting." You do it slowly, meditatively. Somewhere behind you, a servant counts each sweep. There is debate among scholars whether an odd or even number was preferred. Most believe even was safer, in case a court astrologer walked by mid-sweep. You're almost finished when a soft clinking draws your attention. A lacquered box has been placed before you. Its lid opens with a click that sounds far too serious for what it contains. Calligraphy supplies. You sigh, not because you're tired, but because this, too, is part of the ritual. You pull out the inkstone, carefully pour a splash of rainwater collected from a monk's cloak, yes, really, and begin grinding the ink. Round and round. Not too fast, not too slow. The Tang believed that grinding ink after food helped align the stomach's fire with the mind's clarity. Historians still argue if this was medical, poetic, or both. Once the ink is ready, thick, dark, slightly fragrant with pine, you take up the brush. The first stroke should always honor the moment, so you begin a small verse in standard script. Steam rises, bowl empty, silence full of song. You pause. Not bad. A bit indulgent, but breakfast deserves it. The monk, not to be outdone, leans over and composes his own. Rice is gone. I remain. Spoon holds memory. You raise your eyebrows slightly. Competitive digestion poetry. It's happening. The registrar clears his throat and scribbles. Forgot salt again. Still better than luo yang. Okay. You all chuckle. A breach of etiquette, yes, but just small enough to be forgiven. You continue writing. A full page of reflections on grains, on steam, on the way pickled plum tastes like sorrow but in a good way. This isn't for display. These poems will be tucked into a drawer or burned later with incense. They're offerings to no one and everyone. They're how the Tang ensured breakfast wasn't just consumed, it was commemorated. Your ink dries. A servant appears carrying a small pale cloth. On it, a single flower-shaped stamp in red, the seal of digestive virtue. He places it on the corner of your mat, bows, and disappears. You have been acknowledged. You have been deemed balanced. You exhale. That exhale has been waiting since the jujube. And now, finally, the post-meal hot towel. It's warmed with chrysanthemum steam and wrapped around a stone to retain heat. You unroll it gently, press it against your cheeks, your forehead, and, most luxuriously, your eyelids. The monk hums something that might be gratitude or a memory of tofu. You sit back, hands resting on your knees, towel on your lap, bowl clean, ink dry. But even this isn't the end. There's one more piece. The thank you offering. Not to the cook, not to the monk, not to the registrar. To the grains. A tiny bowl is filled with the last spoonful of porridge. The dregs, the burned bits, the pieces too soft or oddly shaped, and placed under a small tree in the courtyard. It's said to be for the kitchen spirit, who oversees food, warmth, and whether your digestion results in enlightenment or indigestion. You carry the bowl outside, barefoot again. The morning sun is soft. Birds are pretending not to watch you. You place the bowl at the foot of a pomegranate tree and bow once, then twice. You whisper, "Thanks for not sticking to the pot." That part is your own invention, but you feel the kitchen spirit wouldn't mind. You return indoors. The mat is empty now. The monk has wandered off. The registrar is asleep, a scroll over his face. The courtyard is quiet. You sit, very still, letting breakfast become memory. One last sip of cold tea. A final glance at the ash spiral on the incense tray. And just like that, the meal is over. Now that your belly is calm and your scrolls are inked, you enter the next phase of the Tang Dynasty morning. Tableware evaluation. Yes, because the spoons, trays, and bowls you just used are not mere vessels for food. They are extensions of the self. And you, being a moderately respectable civil servant, or at least an unusually fastidious breakfast guest, are expected to inspect each item before it's whisked away for cleaning. You begin with the bowl. It's porcelain from the famous kilns at Qing. Creamy white, delicately thin, with a faint crackle glaze that catches the light like frost on rice leaves. You tilt it toward the morning sun, searching for imperfections. One hairline flaw near the base. You nod, not in disappointment but in appreciation. Imperfection, after all, was seen by Tang philosophers as a sign of sincerity. True balance lies in asymmetry, they'd say, usually while misbuttoning their robes. You gently clink the spoon against the bowl rim, testing for tonal clarity. A dull sound indicates damage. A ringing chime suggests craftsmanship. Yours rings like a zither string. Very good. You smile to yourself. You may not have the emperor's ear, but you do have his taste in utensils. Beside the bowl lies the lacquered tray, red as oxblood, polished to a sheen so perfect it reflects your slightly disheveled morning hair. Its edges are trimmed with gold filigree, not actual gold, of course. You're not that well connected, but a convincing metallic powder. Each tray is hand-inked with the symbol for harmony, though your tray's symbol has a faint smudge, possibly the registrar's elbow. You'll say nothing. Harmony, after all. A young attendant kneels to your right, unrolling a scroll of tiny checkboxes. It's the inventory of morning objects. And yes, it's a real thing. You read aloud as he points. Bowl, 1. Minor flaw, aesthetic. Spoon, 1. Tone, excellent. Tray, 1. Edge mark, noted. Towel, returned slightly damp. Poem sheet, intact. You both nod. He rolls it back up and vanishes with the grace of someone who has done this 17 times already this morning. Then, the ceremonial bowl rewrap begins. You take a soft linen cloth, dyed indigo and hand-stamped with plum blossoms, and begin wrapping your bowl. Fold left, fold right, tuck the bottom, not the top. The monk taught you this. He claimed it brings clarity to the liver. Historians are still unclear if that's metaphor or just really bad anatomy. Your wrapped bowl is placed inside a small cedar box with sliding joints. No nails, no glue, just craftsmanship and patience. You sigh, then slide the lid shut. There's something deeply satisfying about storing objects with such care. Something that says, I lived this morning well. But you're not quite done. There's one more element of breakfast that lingers like tea leaves after the cup is empty. The seating mat. Technically, it's a breakfast surface, not a plate. But in the Tang, the mat is sacred. It's where your aura settles. And it needs to be folded with the exactness of a military order and the gentleness of a lullaby. You kneel again. The mat is reed-woven, trimmed in navy silk, its corners stitched with gold thread forming tiny turtles. Turtle corners were a sign of patience. You smooth out the creases and begin the traditional trifold. Long side in, short side over, roll, bow, press. Each motion deliberate. You've done this so many times that your hands move before your mind. A servant lights a tiny pinch of sandalwood on a ceramic plate beside you, just enough to mark the end of the meal with a scent that fades before the next bell. The room is warm now, full of steam, ash, quiet, and the soft shuffle of people returning to their official duties. And yet, you linger. Your hand rests on the wrapped bowl, your eyes on the ash spiral. For a moment, you're struck by the sheer effort poured into a meal that consisted of little more than rice and pickles. The time, the tools, the incense, the posture, the silence, the absurdity, and the peace. That's the secret, isn't it? This wasn't really about eating. It was about proving, again and again each morning, that order can exist. That beauty lives in arrangement. That even if your empire is at war, your boss is corrupt, and your cousin owes you 4 bolts of silk, you can still begin the day with a clean bowl and a precise spoon. That you can, for a single hour, be perfectly aligned with the universe. You stand. A soft chime echoes from somewhere above, the signal to disperse. The monk has already vanished. The registrar snores gently in the corner, chopsticks still in hand. You leave him there. Tang etiquette states that post-breakfast naps are neither discouraged nor judged. You step out into the sunlight. The morning has bloomed. Peach blossoms are opening, cicadas are warming their wings. The sky is blue in that dusty, imperial way. You stretch your arms wide, robe sleeves billowing like banners. Breakfast is over. The day begins. The meal may be finished, your bowl boxed, your breath composed. But the Tang Dynasty insists on one more moment of reflection. You don't just walk away from breakfast, you transition out of it, as one might leave a temple or a particularly slow opera. And the traditional transition is, of course, poetry. Not your poetry, though yours wasn't bad this morning, really, but court poetry. The kind posted on scrolls outside the Ministry of Rites, or recited by retired officials as they sip weak plum wine and contemplate retirement for the 8th year in a row. So you rise from your mat and follow the corridor toward the poem wall, a structure dedicated to breakfast-themed verse. Yes, this is real. In elite households, it was common to have an entire wall or bamboo screen upon which guests would pin short morning stanzas. There were rules. No politics, no complaints, and absolutely no mention of indigestion. You approach, holding a small slip of mulberry paper. On it, your 5-line effort from earlier. Steam from the bowl. Curls like an old friend's voice. Soft, predictable, never too much. Just enough to stay. You pin it between a haiku about bean curd texture and a quatrain titled Ode to That One Pickle I Dropped. Your poem doesn't shine, but it holds its own. You bow slightly to the wall. The paper rustles back. A servant nods at your work and offers you a small brush. You wave it off. You're done composing for now. But he insists. He wants you to contribute to the scroll of flavors, a more light-hearted collection kept in the breakfast alcove for moments of digestive whimsy. You sigh, take the brush, and write, "Tofu, why do you wobble like my career?" He laughs. You both do. The first real laughter of the morning. The Tang may be strict, but even Tang officials appreciated a good, self-deprecating tofu joke. After the scroll is re-rolled, you're guided to another room. This one quieter, darker, with heavy curtains and a thick rug on the floor. It's the post-breakfast contemplation chamber. Inside, low stools, tiny tables with black stones, and small pots of ink. At the center, a shallow bowl filled with breakfast tokens. These are not for eating. These are symbolic objects left behind by previous guests. A sliver of preserved pear, a clipped lotus petal, a burned matchstick from the tea fire. You're allowed to choose one. You pick a tiny clay figurine of a millet grain with a carved face. It looks worried. You set it gently on a black, lacquered shelf. Behind it, 1,000 other offerings gathered over the years, each one silently proclaiming, "We too have survived the breakfast." A clerk, unseen until now, hands you a fresh scroll. On it, today's breakfast horoscope. Those who chewed slowly may receive clarity. Those who sipped before the 8th drop. Expect mild confusion. Those who spilled pickle juice. Prepare for an unexpected poem. You nod. Sounds about right. Next comes the cleansing walk, a slow circular path around the inner courtyard meant to help your meal settle and your thoughts rise. The stones underfoot are smooth, warmed by the morning sun. You walk in silence, joined by a young apprentice wearing a robe 2 sizes too big and holding a stringed instrument he clearly can't play. You ask him how long he's been walking this route. "Since the solstice," he replies. You ask him when he last had a real breakfast. He looks down. "Yesterday, it was cold. The pickles judged me." You give him a sympathetic pat on the shoulder. Tang pickles are notoriously harsh critics. The walk ends at a small archway, covered in creeping wisteria. Beyond it lies the rest of the day. Paperwork, scrolls, dusty halls of civil procedure. But just before crossing, you pause. Because on a nearby ledge sits a breakfast diary, where guests may leave final thoughts before rejoining the empire. You open it. Flip past entries like Millet, 8:10, Monk, still humming. Overall, peaceful. Too many daikon slices. Felt emotionally unprepared. Remember, ask for the dragon spoon next time. You write, "I came hungry, I leave mysterious." You shut the book. A breeze catches the edge of your robe. Behind you, the sounds of dishes being washed with song. Ahead, the low drone of bureaucracy. You take one last look at the breakfast courtyard, where incense still lingers and sunlight dances on polished bowls. And you step forward. Because Tang mornings don't end. They dissolve. The sunlight greets you like an old friend with a cold handshake, gentle but very much awake. You've passed through the final arch of the breakfast compound, but even here the rituals trail behind you like a silk sash caught in a breeze. Your stomach is quiet, your mind slightly hazy. And now it's time to do what every proper Tang citizen does once the porridge has settled. Rearrange your eating tools according to state-mandated ceramic etiquette. Yes, that's right. You're going back. Not to eat, of course. Never that. But to catalog, clean, and return each vessel, utensil, and saucer to its precise, government-acknowledged place. Because in the Tang Dynasty, the utensils you used this morning are legally classified as transitory ritual instruments and must be returned in a specific order lest the entire household be accused of breakfast heresy. This was not a joke. There were forms. You step back into the inner kitchen compound. It's busier now, filled with clinking bowls, soft broom sounds, and the murmured apologies of a junior attendant who has spilled tea on his own foot for the second time this week. Your first task is the porcelain alignment. You kneel before a low wooden shelf, each level labeled in neat brushed calligraphy, bowls of mild use, platters of single intention, spoons for solemn liquids, and, of course, miscellaneous. You hold your bowl up to the light. A final inspection. No cracks, no unseemly grain residue. You place it gently under mild use. It gives a satisfying thok as it settles onto the pine wood shelf. One down. Next, the chopstick wrap. You retrieve your personal pair, polished sandalwood, engraved with a tiny fox at the top, and begin wrapping them in a fresh linen sheath. The cloth has been scented with crushed pear blossom, and while folding it in thirds, you recite the standard closing phrase, handled with hunger, returned with humility. A small bell chimes in the background. That's the spoon clerk. You hurry. You present your spoon to her, an elderly woman with a squint so sharp it could cleave a daikon, and she inspects it like a general reviewing troops. She nods once. You receive a spoon return token, stamped with red ink shaped like a spiral. No one knows why. Some say it's an ancient Tang symbol for completion. Others say it's a noodle. Historians still argue about this. The lacquer tray goes into a bath of cooled rice water and gets scrubbed with a brush made of horsehair and melon rind. You dry it yourself, because in the Tang, personal trays were an extension of one's moral hygiene. To neglect your tray was to neglect your soul. A clerk approaches, bowing slightly, holding out a cloth-lined box. The implement's ledger. You sign it with a brush dipped in diluted soy ink, your signature curling softly like steam from porridge. Another attendant cross-checks your items. He gives you a slip of paper, torn from a larger scroll, which reads, "Congratulations! Your breakfast has been logged in accordance with the 12th year edicts of savoring." You feel proud. Also slightly annoyed, because you just realized you forgot to align your vinegar dish to the northeast like the manual suggested. But no one saw, and the kitchen spirit tends to be forgiving before noon. Just when you think you're finished, you're led into a small room with shelves of empty bowls, and one curious object, a porcelain display altar. On it sit 3 bowls, elevated on wood stands, with small tags below them. One reads, "Used by visiting scholar Huo, known for his poem O Rice, Why Do You Vanish?" Another, "Cracked bowl, repurposed by Monk G, now holds wisdom pebbles." And finally, the whistle bowl, once sang when millet was too hot. You bow before the altar. This is part of the ritual. You are not worshipping bowls. You are honoring memory. The Tang believed strongly that breakfast objects accumulated moral residue. A well-used spoon carried echoes of thoughtfulness. A chipped bowl, if treated with dignity, could bring insight. One official claimed he received clarity on tax reform after drinking tea from a flawed cup. Though, in fairness, he was later exiled for unrelated reasons. You leave a single sesame seed in the offering bowl beside the altar. Not for luck, just in case. Now comes the final inspection, the utensil harmonization ceremony. Don't panic. It's not as formal as it sounds. Actually, it's worse. 4 officials gather in a corner chamber, each holding a short staff of office and a cloth napkin. One by one, they check the alignment of every returned tray, bowl, and tool. They consult charts. They mutter to each other. One of them uses a plumb line. You wait. They nod. A jade seal is pressed to a parchment that says, in glorious gold ink, "Approved. No forks detected." You breathe. That was a close one. At last, the exit bell chimes. A soft wooden clack. You've been released from the ritual zone. You re-enter the daylight a different person. Not because you're full, but because you've successfully navigated every single item of Tang Dynasty breakfast protocol. As you walk out, you pass a mirror. Your reflection looks peaceful, dignified, slightly hungry again. But that's normal. Tang breakfast wasn't about sating. It was about setting, the tone, the posture, the universe. You adjust your robe, inhale the scent of burnt incense, and whisper to yourself, I really should have asked for the duck egg. You may think your obligations are over. You may think you've folded, stacked, rinsed, aligned, bowed, and recited your way through the entire Tang breakfast experience. But no, not quite. Because in the Tang Dynasty, no meal is truly complete until it has been contextualized by a conversation with someone slightly more important than you. Enter the visiting scholar. He arrives just as you step into the courtyard for your post-breakfast stretch. His robes are a bit too white, his scroll case a bit too large, and his eyebrows, impossibly, are shaped like question marks. He doesn't say hello. He says, "You don't happen to have thoughts on the symbolic hierarchy of condiments, do you?" And just like that, you're in it. This is the post-meal debate, a tradition among the literate elite wherein one must discuss something vaguely philosophical and entirely food-adjacent, preferably while digesting. The rules are simple. No firm conclusions, at least 3 historical references, and 1 metaphor that doesn't quite land. You clear your throat. I've often wondered whether the positioning of pickled plum at the southern quadrant of the tray reflects an unconscious celestial longing. The scholar smiles. You've passed the opening volley. Ah, he says, but then wouldn't vinegar occupy the moon's position? And what does that say about the state of marital harmony under the current dynasty? You pretend to think. You're mostly just watching his sleeves flap as he gesticulates. He launches into a short story about an official in Chang'an who once arranged his breakfast tray to mirror the Big Dipper. Apparently, it backfired when his supervisor mistook the tofu square for Saturn and promoted the wrong person. Historians still argue whether that anecdote is real. Some say it's allegory. Others say it's satire. A few suspect it's both, and were exiled for saying so. The scholar offers you a slice of dried orange peel from a small tin. You accept, as is custom, and chew slowly. It's bitter. Of course it is. Breakfast debates should be slightly uncomfortable. You nod, then reply, and yet isn't it true that the more bitter the peel, the sweeter the memory? He exhales loudly and announces, You've been reading Han Yu again. You haven't, but you appreciate the compliment. The debate shifts to teacup alignment, then to the symbolic weight of lacquer patterns, and then, somehow, to whether sesame oil was ever used as a peace offering during border negotiations. It's impossible to know if you're winning, but you're still standing. That counts. Eventually, the scholar tires. He bows. You argue like someone who's had adequate millet. You bow in return. You provoke like someone who skipped the pickles. Respect. He drifts away, muttering about ink viscosity. You exhale. The debate has done its job. It has extended the spirit of breakfast into the body of the day. You feel oddly fulfilled, a little smarter, and strangely, a bit more alert. But no time to linger, because now you've been summoned, by gesture, naturally, to the scroll of morning echoes. This is an actual log kept in many Tang households, a large book where breakfast participants record not just poetry, but thoughts, observations, even dreams that occurred during or shortly after the meal. You take your place at the low writing bench. The brush is slightly damp. The paper smells faintly of bamboo. You write, "Today the tea held stillness. The tofu refused metaphor. The plum was more patient than I." You pause. Then, for good measure, you draw a tiny duck. Tradition fulfilled. The page turns. Someone else is waiting to write behind you. You bow slightly and return to the courtyard where the incense of closure has just been lit. It's a blend of cedar, lotus root, and, oddly, dried citrus rind. The smoke curls upward in a shape that looks vaguely like a spoon, or a question mark, or a sleeping cat. You sit near it, not too close. Closure incense isn't for breathing, it's for considering. A boy appears with a fan. Not for you, for the incense. He waves gently to distribute the smoke evenly across the courtyard, a practice believed to balance the chi of digestion and intellect. Or possibly just to keep the flies away. You're quiet now, truly quiet. Not just because you've been fed and folded and philosophized, but because Tang breakfast doesn't end with food, it ends with stillness. You look up. The sky is brighter. The sun has cleared the edge of the roof. A cicada begins to hum. Somewhere nearby, someone sings a soft tune about yam paste and honor. You think about that slice of pickled lotus root, how it was arranged, how it tasted, how it's now part of you, for at least a few hours. You smile. Breakfast is over. But its echoes linger. The echoes of breakfast fade like steam from a cooling bowl. But the Tang morning is far from over. Now begins what scholars have termed, only half-jokingly, the digestive theater. This isn't a performance you watch. It's one you inhabit, and your role, and the well-fed, morally upright, posture-conscious citizen who must now move gracefully through space without disturbing the stillness created by breakfast. You rise from the incense bench slowly, like a scroll being unrolled. Your robe adjusts itself in soft folds as if it too understands the sanctity of the hour. Ahead of you, the hall of quiet circulation. This isn't a hall in the architectural sense. It's more like a concept made real. A long, shaded walkway lined with bamboo screens, where one is expected to walk precisely 6 laps to promote harmony between the spleen and lungs. Or perhaps it was the gallbladder and memory. No one's quite sure. Even Tang doctors used a lot of poetic license. You begin the circuit. 1 step, 2 steps. Heel flat, toes brush. The floor is made of polished stone, inlaid with small ceramic tiles shaped like plum blossoms. With each lap, you nod politely to the other walkers, officials, scribes, the occasional wandering poet clutching a rice cake like it's a thesis. You spot the registrar again. He's doing his laps with the slightly hunted look of someone trying to remember if he returned his vinegar bowl at the right angle. He probably didn't. You say nothing. You're in digestive theater now. Talking is frowned upon. On your 3rd lap, a servant appears with a tray of breath-cleansing tablets, tiny cubes made of dried mint, fennel seed, and something floral you can't identify. You take one and let it melt on your tongue. It tastes like regret chased by poetry. The 4th lap brings you past the post-porridge reflections wall, an open slate surface where passers-by may chalk brief revelations or small grievances. You pause and write, "Too many pickles. Not enough plum." Next to it, someone has scribbled, "Spoon rotated mid-meal, possible omen, investigate." You nod solemnly and move on. By lap 5, your steps feel lighter. Not because you're energized, but because the Tang believed in something called post-ingestion ascension, the idea that proper digestion made you spiritually buoyant. You don't exactly feel holy, but your feet are definitely more cooperative. You finish your 6th lap. An attendant claps once, softly, to indicate your completion. He offers you a digestive scroll, a short text meant to be read while seated under a tree for internal rebalancing. You walk into the cypress grove where thin trees rustle with faint conspiratorial energy. You choose a seat on a stone bench and unroll your scroll. It reads, To digest is to remember without chewing. To walk is to stir the pot of self. The bowl is empty. You are not. You sit with that for a moment. You don't need to understand it. It understands you. In the distance, the faint sound of a guqin, a seven-stringed zither, drifts across the breeze. Somewhere, a musician is playing a tune known as Porridge After Rain. It's slow, meandering, and filled with hesitant pauses. You feel your shoulders unclench. A servant places a jade pebble in your palm, a final token. It's smooth, oval, and slightly cool. This, you are told, represents the final grain. It's not for eating, it's for reminding. You carry it in your sleeve for the rest of the day. Historians still argue about the jade pebble. Was it a symbolic gesture? A mindfulness tool? Or just a clever excuse to charge more for breakfast? You tuck the pebble into your sleeve pocket and breathe deeply. The grove is quiet now. Sunlight flickers through cypress leaves in narrow beams that make even your ankles feel philosophical. A figure approaches. It's the young monk from earlier, the one who hummed through the simmering phase. He sits beside you without a word, takes a breath, and simply says, "Did you notice the tofu was spiced differently today?" You blink. You hadn't. He nods. A monk from Silla brought new 5-spice proportions. Less star anise, more orange peel. You both sit in silence for a while, honoring the great cross-cultural migration of flavor profiles. Then, the monk pulls a folded piece of paper from his sleeve. On it, a drawing of his breakfast. It's terrible. The spoon is backwards. The rice looks like sad gravel. But he shows it to you with pride. You take your thumb and press a red ink print on the corner, as is tradition. "Approved," you say. He beams. The sun is higher now, but you're not rushed. The Tang didn't believe in sudden transitions. Morning should melt into noon, like tofu into congee. You rise, bow to the monk, and begin the departure circuit. 3 slow steps, a pause, then 3 more. Behind you, the grove settles again. The guqin melody fades. You pass once more through the breakfast gate, where the incense spiral has finally burned to its tail. A servant bows, closes the scroll of names, and removes your place setting from the ledger. You are now post-breakfast, and the empire continues. You're officially post-breakfast, legally and spiritually. But don't let that lull you into thinking your Tang Dynasty morning has drifted into irrelevance. No. Now comes the part that many modern scholars overlook, and that ancient bureaucrats approached with a quiet reverence. The tray commentary ritual. Yes, commentary. You re-enter a modest room just off the main courtyard, the walls lined with bamboo scroll tubes and low writing desks. This is not a place for cooking, nor even for poetry. This is where the meal, now a memory, is dissected, documented, and debated. The Tang believed strongly that reflection without record is digestion without purpose. A scribe greets you with a slight bow and unrolls the breakfast evaluation scroll. It's a wide sheet with multiple columns: grain texture, utensil harmony, condiment symmetry, and general spiritual alignment. You're not joking. These are real categories. He hands you a brush. You hesitate. How does one rate the jujube's commitment? You begin with the millet porridge. Consistent, slightly over-aligned with earth element. Acceptable chew, quiet aftertaste. Then the tea. Not assertive. Leaves performed as expected. Possibly too reflective. Onto the tofu. Fried with restraint. Spice level contemplative. Minor wobble suggests spiritual openness. The scribe nods, clearly impressed. He adds a small red mark beside your entry, indicating that your commentary will be copied and sent to the Central Ministry of Flavor Affairs for inclusion in the seasonal digest. A high honor. Next, you proceed to the Scroll of Contradictions, where guests are allowed to log moments that felt spiritually confusing. You write, placed plum next to vinegar, felt both enriched and unmoored. Beneath your note, someone else has written, spoon too beautiful, distracted from internal stillness. Valid. Now you're led to the tray of hypotheticals. This too is a real thing. It's a flat stone surface where wooden mock-ups of breakfast dishes are arranged for philosophical exploration. A scholar in gray robes stands nearby, arms crossed, waiting to challenge your instincts. He gestures to a tray with three simulated items: lotus root, boiled yam, and you take a step closer to the tray of hypotheticals, trying to suppress the sudden realization that you're about to engage in metaphorical breakfast theory. The scholar beside you, robes gray, beard trimmed into a contemplative angle, nods without looking up. His tray holds three symbolic replicas: a carved wooden lotus root, a perfectly smooth stone yam, and a porcelain duck painted with a single brushstroke of melancholy. He gestures to the duck. "Where," he asks in the gentlest voice imaginable, "should this have been placed?" You pause. You feel, instinctively, that the wrong answer here won't get you exiled, but may result in a disappointing poem being written about you. "Northwest quadrant," you say finally, facing slightly toward the tea vessel, but not eclipsing the vinegar dish. He smiles, just barely. "Balanced, but timid," he replies. You nod humbly. "That's fair." The lotus root, he explains, represents repetition, how the rings of your day mirror one another, and how breakfast itself is both unique and inevitably familiar. The boiled yam is submission, softness that still resists, humility that clings to form. And the decorative duck? That's aspiration. Not the thing you eat, but the thing you aim for while pretending not to be hungry anymore. He challenges you to rearrange the tray. You do so cautiously, shifting the yam a finger's width closer to the duck, rotating the lotus root so its holes face upward like a quiet lantern. The scholar breathes in. Now it tells a story. You're not entirely sure what the story is, but you feel strangely pleased. This too is breakfast in the Tang. Not what enters the mouth, but what lingers in the arrangement of symbols after the last bite. You bow, and the scholar stamps your tray configuration with a red seal labeled "interpretively sufficient." Back outside, the incense has burned down to a fine curl of ash, and the morning is starting to shake off its ceremonial slowness. Couriers move with purpose. Young attendants hurry through stone corridors carrying scrolls, dishes, and the emotional weight of undercooked barley. You rejoin the flow. In the garden, you spot a young girl, perhaps 10, seated cross-legged on a straw mat, staring intently at a bowl. Beside her, a teacher adjusts the position of a single plum. You overhear the lesson. No, the plum does not center itself. You center yourself around the plum. Tang education in a nutshell. You pass a corridor filled with scent records, delicate silk banners dyed with the residual aromas of that morning's ingredients. One smells faintly of sesame oil and bean curd. Another, vaguely floral with a bitter undertone, has been labeled over-steeped but honest. A scribe spritzes each one with distilled rice mist to preserve the scent and mood for historical continuity. Because in the Tang Dynasty, breakfast had archives. You're handed a soft roll of parchment titled Summary of Digestive Intentions. You unroll it. It reads, "Your morning reflects harmony with utensils, moderate, symmetry of tray, aligned, plum positioning, debatable, tofu mindfulness, high, composure during pickled critique, exceptional. You've passed." Another clerk steps forward and places a small paper badge on your robe, stamped with the character Chen, meaning morning. It will fade by noon as it's designed to do, but for now it signals that you have participated fully, mindfully, and in the correct ceremonial sequence. You feel accomplished. Not in the flashy trumpet fanfare way, but in the soft, tea-warmed, I remembered to fold my napkin properly way. You have earned the quiet nod of the Tang universe. As you head toward the outer gate, a bell rings in the distance. Not the sharp chime of timing, but a soft one. The bell of closure. It signals that the last bowl has been scrubbed, the final scroll logged, the final sigh of digestion respectfully noted. You stop, take one last look at the garden, the breakfast mat now folded, the incense spiral completed. This was breakfast. You are full, but not of food. You are full of something else entirely. You step beyond the breakfast compound with a faint sense of levitation. The sky is brighter now, leaning toward late morning. Somewhere behind you, the bowls are drying in neat rows, and the vinegar is being rebottled in silence. But you? You're entering a new chapter of the Tang morning, the informal digestive symposium. This symposium is not announced. There are no bells. It simply happens, usually in a shaded courtyard near a garden or under the eaves of a pavilion where people coincidentally meet after breakfast. And as luck, or fate, would have it, a few familiar figures are already gathered there. The monk with the haunting tofu poem, the registrar looking slightly more awake, and two junior officials enthusiastically misquoting Confucius. They sit cross-legged around a low tea table, steam rising from a second pot of tea, the mid-morning brew. You're waved over with lazy familiarity. The symposium has begun. The tea is different now. No longer the reserved, elegant variety served with congee. This pot is bold, slightly smoky, and brewed with crushed coriander and aged mandarin peel. It announces itself. It wakes your spine. You sip. Immediately your thoughts sharpen like a freshly inked brush. The registrar grunts approvingly and says, "This reminds me of the barley uprising in the year of the crooked moon." You raise an eyebrow. There was no such uprising. He knows. That's the point. The monk, smiling, responds, "If barley could revolt, we'd all be servants to our soup." Someone murmurs, "That's the title of my next play." Laughter bubbles up, effortless, like steam through a well-cooked porridge. This is the magic of the informal digestive symposium. No official scrolls, no incense clocks, just humans, tea, and the comfortable vulnerability that comes after an over-analyzed breakfast. One of the junior officials presents a scroll titled "On the Moral Implications of Asymmetrical Dumpling Folds." You all listen, nod solemnly, then vote silently using colored stones. Green for worthy, red for needs more salt, and black for please stop. The scroll receives 2 greens, a red, and a compassionate black. Afterward, a short round of flavor charades is initiated. Someone pretends to be jujube paste. Someone else mimics vinegar regret. Your turn. You embody the emotional arc of oversteeped oolong. Your rendition wins. As the sun inches higher, the conversation slides gently into speculative breakfast futures. What might Tang breakfast look like in 1,000 years? The registrar insists that by then, congee will be streamed directly into the stomach by flute. The monk posits that breakfast will become an internal prayer, with no need for food. You offer the most reasonable prediction. Someone will still be debating the proper distance between tofu and plum. Everyone agrees. After the symposium, you are led, unofficially, quietly, to the Breakfast Archive Annex, a side building known only to those who have passed at least 3 tray commentaries in their life. The room is dim, cooled by thick paper screens and the scent of aged cedar. On shelves, scrolls, sketches, flavor profiles, and something labeled "Historical Napkin Placement Failures." You're allowed to browse. One scroll catches your eye, The Secret Breakfast of Lady C. It details an early morning in which she arranged her entire meal according to a celestial star chart and reportedly ascended briefly into enlightenment before remembering she had a poetry contest at noon. Fascinating. You find another entry. The 12 Forbidden Pickles of Yanzhou. You note 3 you've definitely tried. This concerns you. A clerk appears and offers you a copy of your breakfast reflection summary, beautifully copied onto pressed bamboo paper. Guest, number 4227. Posture, stable. Facial expression, restrained serenity. Pickle response, disciplined. Philosophical contribution, quietly sharp. Napkin fold, lotus, acceptable if asymmetrical. You smile. You've left your mark. Outside, the sound of a bell, low, slow, and unmistakably final, reaches your ears. It is the end of morning bell, rung only once per day. It signals to all who participated in breakfast that the hour of contemplative digestion has passed, and the empire expects your productivity. You rise, tuck the reflection scroll into your sleeve, and bow once to the archive clerk, once to the courtyard, and once out of instinct, toward the spoon that's still somehow on your mind. The path back to your office winds through corridors of blooming plum trees and idle thoughts. Your steps are slower now, but precise. You think of the tea, the monk, the duck. You think, this is what civilization looks like. When a society has the luxury to think deeply about a bowl, a root vegetable, and the ethics of condiment rotation, you know it's doing just fine. You arrive at your desk. A new scroll waits. The work begins. But breakfast? Ah, breakfast remains. By the time you settle onto the woven mat at your civil post, a modest wooden desk under a skylight draped with gauze, you can still feel the faint aftertaste of longan on your tongue and the whisper of jasmine on your sleeves. This, the Tang believed, was ideal. Work done without breakfast residue is hollow, but work done while carrying its essence? That's art. You unfold the day's assignment scroll. It is, unsurprisingly, a bureaucratic directive regarding rice ration distribution in border provinces. You sigh, not from annoyance, but from anticipation. Because in the Tang Dynasty, even rice paperwork has elegance. Before writing, you must complete the official post-breakfast breathing ritual. 4 breaths in, 4 out, each paired with a silent phrase. 1. I have eaten. 2. I have reflected. 3. The duck was sufficient. 4. Now, begin. You dip your brush into the inkstone. It has been sitting in sunlight and is slightly warmer than expected, a sign perhaps that your thoughts will flow. The first character you draw, Gao, rice, is a little wobbly. The second, fun, distribution, is perfect. You're improving. A fellow scribe nearby clears his throat and mutters, "They moved the vinegar line again." You nod sympathetically. There was a quiet scandal last week when someone stored vinegar too close to the lotus root, and the regional inspectors got poetic about it. This reminds you, it's your day to deliver the midday grain feedback slip to the Evaluation Bureau. A humble task, but one with symbolic weight. It requires passing through the Hall of Proportions, where each visitor is expected to recite one statement about their meal's balance. You think for a moment, then decide on, the pickles outnumbered the metaphors, but barely. A clerk marks this on a bamboo tally stick, then stamps your palm with a tiny red sigil shaped like a bowl. It will fade in an hour. Everything in the Tang eventually does. You move on. In the central courtyard, a low table has been set up for public taste reports, an anonymous system where citizens may log opinions, suggestions, or small complaints about that morning's fare. One entry catches your eye. Tea too reflective. Made me think about my cousin again. Another simply reads, tofu shouldn't wobble with secrets. You add your own, would like fewer seeds in future plums, or more confidence. Then you slip away before anyone can recognize your handwriting. Nearby, in a shaded alcove, 2 officials from the Ministry of Weights are playing a slow game of kanji strategy. It's like chess, but each piece represents a different breakfast item, and the goal is to build a harmonious tray before your opponent accidentally brews bitter tea. One player moves a plum to the southern quadrant. The other counters with a tofu rotation. You watch for a moment, then excuse yourself with a bow. You still have to attend the afternoon digestive prognosis lecture, which sounds excruciating but is actually quite peaceful. Mostly humming and mild panic about turmeric. You arrive just as the lecturer, a bald official with breath like old ginger, gestures to a diagram of stomach meridians shaped like a ladle. His main thesis today, kanji dreams can predict market fluctuations. You pretend to take notes. You mostly doodle ducks. After the lecture, a messenger approaches. He's panting, winded from running between departments, and holds out a scroll marked with gold ribbon. Urgent. Very. You break the seal and read. You are invited to the reenactment of the Great Porridge Compromise of 709. Attire, modest. Tone, reverent. Bring a spoon. Ah yes, it's that time again. The reenactment is an annual event where officials gather to replay a legendary morning feast in which 2 rival governors agreed to end a trade dispute by sharing a single bowl of 8 treasure kanji in silence. No one knows what the 8 treasures were. Everyone just brings their best guesses. You return home briefly to retrieve your formal spoon, rosewood, with a mother-of-pearl inlay in the shape of a moon. It hasn't left its velvet pouch since last year. At the venue, a circular stone theater with excellent acoustics and terrible ventilation, you're assigned the role of neutral observer. This means you must neither agree nor disagree with the kanji choices. Just observe and nod slowly when others argue. The governors take their places. The bowl is filled. Each adds one item: red bean, pine nut, goji berry, chrysanthemum petal, lotus seed, preserved orange peel, ginkgo nut, and a wild card, radish thread. A risky move. You hold your breath. They eat, they bow, they don't speak. You nod. A perfect compromise. As the evening lanterns are lit, and the echoes of the performance fade into soft footfalls, someone hands you a commemorative rice cracker shaped like a question mark. You eat it slowly. You don't know if you're still digesting breakfast or previewing tomorrow's. But you know this: the Tang never wastes a meal. Lantern light now softens the stone paths, casting flickering halos across walkways still faintly perfumed by lotus incense and yam steam. You've been digesting breakfast for nearly 12 hours, and it shows, not in your posture, which remains impeccable, but in your pace, slower, measured, as if each step must match the rhythm of a long-simmered porridge pot. And it's only fitting that your Tang Dynasty day should end exactly where it began, in a breakfast courtyard, though this one is purely ceremonial. It's called the Evening Mock Mat, and it's where participants return, not to eat again, of course, but to reflect as if they were about to eat, as a form of narrative closure. You enter the courtyard just as a candle is being lit under a clay bowl. The flame flickers through carved cutouts in the shape of millet grains. Around you, low tables are set with empty bowls, spoons, and trays, arranged perfectly. Everything in place, but nothing to consume. This is a Tang tradition known as reposed arrangement, a silent reenactment of the morning meal, observed in total quiet, to honor the memory of what was digested, and, more importantly, how. You take your place at one of the low tables. A boy approaches with a lacquered scroll and a small pot of tea. He doesn't speak, only bows and gestures to your setting. The scroll reads, "Reflect on the spoon, reflect on the bowl, reflect on the hand that brought it to your lips." You do. The bowl is simple, unglazed, and beautifully flawed. It resembles the one you used earlier, though this one bears a tiny chip, intentionally placed to symbolize the way memory never holds a meal exactly. You admire it. Across from you, another official bows to the tray, then to his own napkin, then gently fans himself with a folded menu. Everyone has their rituals. A bell chimes, and suddenly, a man in white robes steps forward. He's the narrator of consumption, a role often rotated among mid-ranking scholars with excellent handwriting and moderate charisma. He clears his throat and begins reciting the events of the day, not by action, but by flavor. The kanji was neutral, yet it moved us. The tofu trembled but did not falter. The pickle asked a question we could not answer. The tea reminded us of distance. You feel a shiver, or maybe just the wind. Then he gestures toward a small basin of ashes of the spiral, the remnants of the breakfast incense, carefully collected throughout the day. Each guest is invited to place a pinch of the ash into a wooden cup and whisper a word of digestion, not digestion the act, but digestion the virtue. You whisper, stillness. Someone else whispers, curiosity. A child, barely old enough to hold chopsticks, whispers, plum. Each word is written on a slip of paper and tied to a silk cord that will later be hung from the rafters. Part of the archive of intangible bites, a collection of sentiments too ephemeral for scrolls. The wind picks up. A servant extinguishes one of the lanterns, then another. Slowly, the courtyard dims. You are handed a final item, a rice wafer, folded into the shape of a closed eye. You are not to eat it. It's to be placed gently in your bowl as a symbolic endnote. You comply. Now the bowls are no longer vessels, but mirrors. Now the spoons are not tools, but punctuation. The narrator concludes, "Let what was eaten nourish not only the flesh, but the awareness that attended it." You rise. The mat is folded. The bowls are stacked. The shadows thicken. As you exit the courtyard, one last ritual awaits. The hand-washing of closure. Not soap and water, but tea and silence. You dip your fingers into a bowl of cool jasmine infusion, swirl them gently, then dry your hands on a cloth embroidered with characters meaning transient fullness. And just like that, the breakfast day is truly over. You walk home under the moon. No one talks. But inside each passerby, you suspect, is a quiet, perfect bowl of porridge, forever cooling just beneath the surface. By the time you reach your chamber, the moon is a porcelain sliver in the Tang sky, resting like a forgotten spoon on a bowl's rim. The compound is quiet now. No footsteps, no incense, just the hush of night pressing gently on every roof tile. And yet, even as the day slips toward its end, your morning meal still lingers, not in your stomach, but in your breath, your posture, and the careful way you unfasten your robe ties. This is no ordinary winding down. It is the evening digestive descent, a structured release of the morning's ceremonial energy. The Tang called it Xiao Chen Ying, the shadow of breakfast, and believed it must be soothed with softness, like smoothing wrinkles from silk. You sit on the edge of your low bed, legs folded beneath you, as a servant places a bowl of empty warmth nearby, steamed water with no scent or flavor. You're not meant to drink it. You're meant to feel its presence. A warm echo, like the memory of millet. You take 3 deep breaths. The same words return, unbidden. Grain from earth, warmth from fire, balance in bowl. You whisper them this time. Then, as per tradition, you retrieve your morning object, the tiny jade pebble placed in your sleeve hours ago. It's warm now, a little slippery with sleeve lint and meaning. You set it on the bedside altar, right between a brush holder and your emergency vinegar vial. You drift gently into sleep, and in the Tang Dynasty, even dreams know how to follow the ritual order of things. The darkness behind your eyes unfurls not in chaos, but in a serene procession of bowls, trays, and softly murmured poems. You find yourself standing, once again, in a breakfast courtyard. But this time, everything is lighter, weightless, tilted just a few degrees toward the surreal. The mats hover slightly above the ground. The steam from the congee drifts upward, then pauses midair, forming delicate looping characters that slowly spell out, "You forgot the vinegar." You smile. In the dream world, this is not a mistake. It's an invitation. Before you, a table sets itself. First the bowl, then the spoon, then a small jar that emits a sound when placed, something between a sigh and a remembered melody. The air smells faintly of sesame oil and plum blossom, but it's not overpowering. You look down. Your robe is made entirely of napkins, stitched together with threads of tea. Across from you sits a duck, not roast duck, not decorative duck, a living duck, serious, elegant, wearing scholar's robes and reading a scroll titled, "The Philosophy of Flavors That Never Arrived." The duck glances up and says, "You dream in mild broth." You nod. "It's the jujube." The duck approves. You're served a bowl of congee that glows slightly from within. It tastes like everything you've ever meant to say, but didn't. Like a spoonful of memory filtered through 5-spice. You chew slowly. The grains don't vanish. They transform into verses. One grain becomes a childhood morning. Another becomes an apology you once muttered into tea. Another, somehow, becomes the scent of a particular winter. You look around and notice others. Familiar faces from your day. The monk, the registrar, the tray scholar, all seated at their own hovering mats, slowly turning bowls that reflect starlight. None of you speak. None of you need to. Overhead, the sky is no longer sky. It's a vast, lacquered tray, rippling gently with warmth. You feel it cradle the dream like a spoon holding just enough. Someone begins to hum. It's the same tune you heard during the digestive walk. Soft, reverent, meandering like steam through rafters. The duck joins in with a single, perfect quack. A plum falls from nowhere and lands on your mat with a sound like a question mark. You pick it up. Bite. Inside is not a pit, but a word. Balance. The mat beneath you rises just slightly, and then you are no longer sitting, but floating, alongside spoons, trays, folded napkins, and the faint outline of your own contentment. Historians still argue whether this kind of dream is induced by fermented tofu or the deeper rhythms of Tang ritual itself. The truth is, it doesn't matter. You are dreaming, and the dream is obeying every etiquette rule you've ever learned. You pass through a corridor of wind chimes, each tuned to a different condiment. One rings sour, one sweet, one slightly bitter, with a trailing note of ginger. You understand their harmony instinctively. You drift onward, past a scroll of flavor proverbs. The quieter the tea, the louder the truth. Spilled millet is still grain. When the spoon wobbles, listen. You smile, and then you land, gently, on a soft mat stitched with memories. The dream kanji is gone. The duck has bowed. The lacquered tray above begins to fade. You exhale. You are asleep. But you are full, so full, of quiet things that never asked to be loud. Morning returns, not in your dream, but in the outer provinces, where the Tang Dynasty's refined breakfast rituals travel less as law and more as rumor. Out here, far from the lacquered courtyards of Chang'an, the bowls are a little chipped, the pickles a little saltier, and the interpretation of ceremonial alignment somewhat more interpretive. You awaken, dream fading like steam off a bamboo lid, and your thoughts turn to the legendary tale of Governor Li of Sichuan, whose breakfast choices once sparked an uproar that rippled all the way to the capital. It began innocently. The governor, a man with too much confidence and too little poetry, decided one foggy morning to serve garlic with porridge. Garlic with porridge. The moment was recorded by a horrified aide who wrote simply, "He placed the cloves beside the spoon. No apology was offered." In Chang'an, the news spread like an overturned vinegar bowl. The court was scandalized. Scholars convened emergency symposiums. One famously fainted into his pickle tray. Another wrote an angry 5-stanza critique titled "The Clove and the Collapse." Historians still argue whether the incident was truly offensive or just regional improvisation. After all, Sichuan had its own flavor philosophy: bolder, smokier, more chili forward. Some believed Governor Li was trying to marry central refinement with border spice. Others thought he was simply hungover. Either way, the court issued a polite clarification edict stating, "Let garlic be henceforth considered a condiment of last resort. Let porridge remain within the pale of purity. Let no governor season without reflection." The edict was copied onto mulberry paper and delivered by swift courier. Governor Li responded with a boiled yam and a short note. "We will consider the essence of restraint." He did not change his habits. He did, however, begin calling garlic mountain plum, which confused guests but satisfied the Ministry of Semantic Appearances. Elsewhere, other regional breakfasts committed equally poetic offenses. In the northern steppe towns, porridge was sometimes eaten without bowls, ladled into hollowed-out gourds and sipped while riding ponies. Functional? Yes. Ceremonial? Tragically not. In coastal regions, some households added fish sauce to millet congee. While technically flavorful, this was seen in the capital as a grave misreading of porridge's emotional range. One courtier described it as a flavor that attacks before asking questions. Then there was the famous case of Lady Anne, a merchant's daughter in Dunhuang, who allegedly served sweet red bean paste before tea. This inversion of sequence caused a minor existential crisis in her poetry club. No one spoke of it openly, but several members switched from plum wine to vinegar for the remainder of the season. And yet, in each of these breakfast breaches, something beautiful remained: intent. Even when the pickles were unaligned, or the spoon rested at a rebellious angle, the people still gathered, still sat, still paused before the first bite. They still believed, in some quiet corner of their morning, that the bowl meant more than food. You imagine them now, a scholar in a misty southern village, pouring millet from a cracked jug, a weaver's apprentice in the west, brushing off the last sesame seed from her mat, a child in a border outpost, humming the melody of the incense spiral without ever having seen one. Their mornings are less precise, more improvised, but the spirit is there, always there. A bowl, a breath, a bite, a moment. You sit with that for a while, realizing that perhaps the most enduring aspect of Tang breakfast isn't the jade spoon or the lotus root's perfect placement. It's the effort, the stillness, the idea that every day begins with a choice, to rush or to arrange. And even if someone adds garlic or forgets the vinegar or puts the tea on the wrong side of the tray, they still showed up. So you forgive Governor Lee. You even imagine trying his garlic porridge someday? Just not in Chang'an. If the Tang Dynasty had a single unspoken truth, it was this. You may offend a poet, a governor, even a celestial omen, but never, ever offend the kitchen. Because while emperors ruled the land, and scholars debated the placement of tofu, it was the imperial chefs who wielded quiet, terrifying power. Their domain? The unseen heart of breakfast. Their battlefield? The simmering pot. Their downfall? Sometimes. Kanji. The tale begins, as whispered legends often do, with a misstep of steam. One winter morning in the vast kitchens of the imperial palace, a junior cook named Wen was tasked with preparing the emperor's first bowl of 8 treasure kanji. This was no ordinary breakfast. It was the morning of the winter solstice ceremony, when celestial alignments, ancestral spirits, and bureaucratic appetite all collided. Wen, nervous and new, misread the timing incense spiral, placing the millet in 5 drops too early. This shifted the entire process by 11 tragic minutes. By the time the longan was added, the jujubes were listless. The rice, mushy. The flavor? Flat. And flat, in the Tang imperial kitchen, was equivalent to treason with sesame seeds. The bowl was served in gold-trimmed porcelain, as always. The emperor, in his morning haze, lifted the spoon, took one slow bite, then paused. He didn't speak. He simply looked at the head cook. The head cook looked at Wen. Wen looked at the floor. What followed has since become known in court lore as the silence of the 6th spoon, a moment so tense it was later commemorated in a scroll painting depicting a spoon hovering mid-air and a jujube caught forever between belief and betrayal. The emperor said only one thing: this kanji does not know itself. It was the harshest culinary critique in Tang history. Wen was not executed, of course. That would have been vulgar. Instead, he was reassigned to the Department of Tea Temperature Regulation, where he spent the next 9 years measuring lukewarmness with bamboo thermometers and quietly weeping into jasmine steam. But the scandal caused waves. New regulations were passed. Timing incense must be triple verified. No ingredient may enter the pot unless blessed by at least one monk or poem. Every kanji batch must undergo a purpose reflection pause halfway through simmering. The Imperial Culinary Institute released a scroll titled Steam Without Ego, Lessons from a Flat Spoon. It became required reading for all apprentice cooks. Yet, behind closed kitchen doors, whispers persisted. Some said the kanji hadn't truly been overcooked. Some said the emperor had simply woken up sad. Historians still debate this. One fringe theory suggests that Wen's bowl was intentionally sabotaged by a rival cook who swapped the usual osmanthus water for plain snowmelt. Another claims the jujubes used were of northern origin, considered by purists to be emotionally unreliable. Whatever the truth, Wen's kanji became shorthand for any dish that looked correct but lacked soul. A cautionary tale, a culinary ghost story. Even now you can hear a cook mutter it under their breath when porridge bubbles too fast. Careful, or it'll go full Wen. And yet, in the oddest twist, Wen's misstep changed breakfast forever. It reminded the empire that perfection was not in control, but in presence. That even a bowl with the right ingredients, served in gold, could ring hollow if the hand behind it hesitated, rushed, or forgot to breathe. So now, every morning, in kitchens from Chang'an to the sea, just before the first stir, apprentice cooks close their eyes and murmur, "Steam with intention, stir with sincerity, serve with stillness." You imagine when, older now, sipping quietly from a modest clay bowl in some far corner of the empire, not bitter, just peaceful, because even the flattest spoon can become a story. And in the Tang, stories are never wasted, especially the ones that taste faintly of regret and overcooked millet. Not all Tang breakfast legends were forged in gilded kitchens or whispered beneath the eaves of imperial courtyards. Some were born in solitude, on misty mountaintops, beside stone kettles, and inside the cracked shells of soft-boiled eggs. You've likely heard the name Hermit Jun of Mount Lu, philosopher, calligrapher, and arguably the only man in Tang history to use an egg as a political statement. His breakfasts were modest. His insights? Less so. The story goes that Jun lived in a moss-covered hut halfway up Mount Lu, surviving on barley porridge, stream water, and precisely one egg every morning. Always soft-boiled, always eaten in silence. When asked why he ate just one egg, he answered, "Because two would be ambition, and none would be despair." One spring morning, a visiting magistrate hiked up the mountain, hoping to consult Jun about an administrative crisis involving land surveys and plum allotments. But instead of conversation, he found the hermit crouched over a cracked egg, weeping softly. "Is something wrong?" the magistrate asked. Jun lifted the yolk with chopsticks and whispered, "The center was off. The state will follow." That quote was later recorded in the Scroll of Fractured Wisdom, a collection of Shun's cryptic culinary metaphors. It sparked debate in every scholar's hall from Chang'an to the coast. Did he mean that the egg yolk symbolized imperial stability? That the cook's inattentiveness revealed structural decline? Or was the egg just a bit runny? Historians still argue, but one thing's certain. Shun's egg principle changed the way people thought about breakfast. Suddenly, every yolk became a message. Officials began slicing their eggs open horizontally, inspecting them for signs. Perfectly centered meant harmony. Lopsided meant political unrest. Double yolk? Destiny. The imperial court responded swiftly. New guidelines were issued. All eggs served to ranking officials must be soft-boiled between 8 and 10 incense grains. Yolk centering must be assessed by at least 2 impartial observers. Under no circumstance may an egg be interpreted without proper poetic license. Soon, entire academies sprouted up dedicated to ovomancy, the prophetic reading of egg interiors. Students spent years mastering yolk hue, albumin tension, and the philosophical implications of that little jiggle when you tap the side. Naturally, this egg fervor led to scandal. One bureaucrat in Luoyang claimed his egg predicted a regional flood. When no flood came, he blamed a kitchen intern and demanded an apology in omelet form. The intern refused. A duel nearly ensued. It was eventually resolved with vinegar tea and a joint haiku. Still, not everyone bought into Shun's yolk-centric worldview. Some scholars accused him of overcooking philosophy, mixing metaphor with breakfast in ways that strained both. One critic wrote, "An egg is an egg. To believe it speaks is to misread both yolk and self." Jun replied with a smile, and a sketch of an egg on fire labeled, "Ignorance boiled dry." Even now, centuries later, Tang citizens tell tales of the philosopher's egg, of how a single, slightly uneven yolk rippled through the empire like spilled tea over silk. You think of that egg now, how it wobbled between absurdity and truth, how something so ordinary could be made sacred by stillness. Because that's what the Tang taught in all things, especially breakfast. It's never just food, it's reflection, ritual, resistance. A way of saying, I am present, I am paying attention. You wonder quietly if your own yolk was centered this morning. You didn't check. Maybe that was the point. The Tang morning draws to a close, not in haste, but in a soft, ceremonial exhale. You find yourself once again where all this began, Beneath the eaves of a quiet courtyard, a bowl now empty resting beside your folded napkin, and steam long since faded into memory. There's nothing left to stir, no more jujubes to align. Even the tea leaves at the bottom of your cup have gone still, their patterns no longer whispering omens, but simply resting. You rise slowly from the mat, spine straight, not from posture training, but from reverence. The mat is rolled. The bowl returned to its place. Your hands brush against each item with deliberate tenderness, as though thanking them for the performance. You step outside into a day fully awake. The plum trees have begun to drop their blossoms, one by one, like a silent applause from the branches. A breeze tugs at the corner of your robe and carries with it the last trace of vinegar, or perhaps jasmine. It's hard to tell anymore. The scents have become memories. A small child scurries past, gripping a carved spoon far too large for his hand. He waves it like a sword. You remember doing the same, years ago, pretending to conquer breakfast as if it were a battlefield, not a sanctuary. You smile. Further along the path, an elderly monk sits by a stream, feet bare, stirring a bowl of cold rice with a twig. He looks up and says, without preface, "Some mornings are meant to be eaten. Others are meant to be remembered." You bow, not deeply, just enough. The world has returned to its hum, scribes chanting over inkstones, merchants adjusting sesame displays, couriers breathing hard as they deliver proclamations likely about soy sauce taxes. But you? You carry something else. Not pride, not knowledge. Just a bowl-shaped stillness in the center of your chest. You are a little more aware, a little more aligned. The spoon in your sleeve feels less like a tool and more like a key. At the outer gate, a clerk hands you your final token of the morning, a pressed rice wafer etched with the character tin, stillness. You're meant to dissolve it in water at twilight, or simply keep it in your sleeve and forget. Both are acceptable in the Tang. You take it without words and step into the larger world. The morning is gone, but it has not left you. Because in this dynasty of incense clocks and fermented metaphors, breakfast is not a moment. It is a state, and you have passed through it. Fully, quietly, gloriously. The day softens now, like porridge cooling in a lacquered bowl. You feel it in your limbs, the slow release, the warmth unfurling in quiet waves. The world around you grows hushed. Shadows stretch longer, light becomes golden and kind. The rituals are done, the utensils returned, the tea sipped to silence. Let everything else drift. Let the pickled plum settle at the bottom of the dish. Let the last curl of incense fade into the wood grain. Let the spoon rest. You are not expected to do anything more. Not to rearrange, not to recite, only to breathe. In, out. You are no longer in the Tang Dynasty, but some part of you remains there, seated on a mat, hands tucked into sleeves, watching a bowl steam with gentle purpose. You've eaten thoughtfully, you've waited patiently, you've stirred without rushing, and in doing so, you've become part of something larger, slower, wiser. The world may clamor again tomorrow, with noise, with urgency, with its uneven rhythms. But here, for now, you are balanced. You are full, not of food, but of quiet. So let go. Let the mat beneath you fade. Let the bowl dissolve. Let your breath carry you across that final threshold, into sleep, into stillness, into that great, soft courtyard of dreams. You have passed through the morning, and now there is nothing left to do. Just rest.